So, welcome to part 4, where we are discussing the rule, not the exception, the case of Murad Merali, who recently, I say recently, literally 10 hours ago from when I'm filming this, released a video, a follow-up apology video after having been caught out being involved in racial play and homophobic fetishization and slurs and all sorts from an OnlyFans account that he had, after having been known for being a huge ally to Black women and ethnic minorities in general, and reporting on things going on Love Island. So guys, we've been talking about this for ages. If you're still following on, please let me know in the comment section that you are still following. If you're not following, you better go start at part 1. And you better watch it through, because otherwise you're not going to know how we got to this trail of thought, and everything I'm going to say is going to sound crazy to you. So start at part 1. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're feeling the vibe and you want to join the tribe. I'd really appreciate it. And also, YouTube ain't want nobody speaking the truth like I am on here. So the only way your girl's voice is going to get spread is if y'all support me, if y'all share my stuff. Let me know what you think in the comments, hit the like button, and let's continue. So we've ended off on the last segment of this whole thing. And by the way, I've only split this up purely because I feel like sometimes it's easier for people to see things in digestible chunks. And I've tried to keep those chunks in digestible thought steps that we've gone through. We're now going into a part where he starts to ask about he starts to reflect on the two sides of how his actions can be interpreted and the impact that they could have. So he says, and this is after he's obviously said that he still says that it's not an excuse, and he acknowledges that his racial hypocrisy. So he's acknowledging that he's been racially hypocritical, right? Which is great, because he was, and that was my feeling as well. When I saw the first apology that I think he's now taken down, I'm like, what do you mean you were doing race play, using all these racial slurs, homophobic slurs, when you're supposed to be, you've been making yourself this ally, basically been, gaining more support for being this ally. So what do you mean, whatever? So he goes on to, and I like that he's acknowledged that, so that's great. He then goes on to say, because of his previous engagement in race play, is he able to he's able to sympathize. I think it's something like he's able to sympathize or something like that with ethnic minorities in general, which is interesting, because for me this is the first time where I can really see why he was so, because I always used to think, why are you so obsessed like with Black women? Like, and again, like I said, I talked to him in a previous video about the fetishization of us and stuff like that. I'm like, it's just another person like who wants to just fetishize us as an opportunity to whatever. But it makes sense now, because it was something that he experienced something, and he was seeing things that was triggering his own experience of that experience, which is makes a lot of sense. Anyway, he goes on to say, because of his previous engagement in race play, is he able to sympathize with minorities, or is he a hypocrite? So he's actually asking the question on either side. Is it that he's sympathizing, or is it that he's a hypocrite? Now, I think there's actually two sides to this question, and we're going to go on to the next question he has after, because that one's really interesting as well. I think there's two sides to this question. I think on the one hand, I think his driving force for fighting for, these things is because he felt like he was fighting for himself, and he could genuinely see things because of what he had been through. So even though previously I would have said he was just a complete racial hypocrisy and he's a hypocrite, I will say now, and I'm very surprised to say this, but I gotta keep it real with y'all. I could be all up here, and let me say this as well, guys. It'd be very easy for me to just be like, oh, look at him, finally took accountability, you people don't know what this, that. I could easily go down the angry route and completely ignore his experience, especially being a Black woman. And this is why I'm actually making these videos as a Black woman. But I'm trying to actually do what we say we do in society, which is be understanding to one another, support mental health, etc., and everything. And I can see how, because I've experienced myself, some of the videos I talk about on my YouTube channel, the reason why I understand what people have been through is because I've been through it myself. And so when I see it, I see the signs, and I'm like, oh yeah. And so when other people are like, oh, it seems like someone's just making a big deal, I'm like, yeah, it's probably because you've not ever either experienced it, or been around somebody enough to have seen that this is actually how this stuff goes down. So, or is he a hypocrite? To some extent, he is also still a hypocrite. to some extent. Now, I don't know when he stopped this. He claims that he stopped years ago, and he's been in therapy for the last 4 or 5 years. So if he did really stop, and he has been getting healing for this, and as he claims that he really did this stuff, this sex work in the beginning, just to make money to be able to pay for therapy and stuff and further his life, then I would not necessarily see him as a hypocrite in that regard, only because I feel like the level of trauma and everything that he went through probably was all entangled into what he was doing. However, he is acknowledging it's problematic, and it still is problematic. It still is problematic. I may not necessarily see it as hypocritical, but I still see it as problematic, and I still see it as something that needed to be acknowledged now. Since it all came out, people obviously would want an explanation. Unfortunately, that's the nature of being on social media. This is something I'm putting myself out to. People holding me accountable to things that I've done in the past, things coming out, and that's why I purposely jump ahead of it and tell you guys all the time that I'm not perfect. Listen, you might think I'm a good person, you might think I'm great, you might think I'm intelligent, you might think whatever, you might think I'm so kind and caring. And there are people in this world who probably think of me as a villain. Some of them are narcissistic, some of them are resentful and jealous, some of them are telling the truth. I have been a villain in their life, right? So just to put that out there, that yes, as being on you know, on public platforms, there is a need to sometimes publicly address certain topics, and I think that's what actually can make it hard for creators, you know, especially when maybe you didn't necessarily set out to have anything that was to do with the trauma in your life, but you're still opening yourself up to that. You know, and that's something I had to think about even before I started my YouTube channel. I was like, no matter whether I have 10 subscribers or what, I could at any point, anything can come out, and I had to really think about everything that I've been through and think, you know what, Lord, I'm just going to trust that with you, because I'm just doing the best with what I got now. And that's all I can do. Anyway, he then goes on to say, he was thinking, is talking about what he did, was he aiding and abetting institutional forms of racism, or is it a dark kink? So is him even bringing up the subject, bringing the attention, because this is the other thing now. This is where this is all very interesting to me, because I'm like, him talking about it, right? He's saying like, is he aiding and abetting institutional forms of racism? As in, now he's spoken about it, and he's referring to this as a fetish that some people have. Fetishes are generally accepted, and I think I'm going to do a whole, I kind of touch, actually, we'll see. Actually, we'll talk about it in the next point. Because he's saying here, is it a dark kink, right? And then he goes on to say, he uses an example of like a dark kink being a woman who, let's say, is a feminist who's upset about, you know, the patriarchy, whatever. In her version of having a dark kink, likes to play the misogynistic male character kind of thing. Do you see what I mean? And I find that to be a really interesting question. And I think, given the way modern day society is and the way that we see things and our ignorance, is his engagement in race play, is he talking about it aiding and abetting institutional forms of racism? I think yes. Because I really think, I'm just going to say this now, I'm going to say it plain and simple. We need to throw the idea of most of these fetishes out the window. I said this already before. A lot of the fetishes, I feel, are just people's ways of like sexually hiding their trauma and dealing with it in a kind of perverted way. And I'll give you guys an example, one that I was cringing about in the previous video that I was thinking about. It's like people calling, it's like women calling guys daddy, right? And I've thought about this a lot. This is one of those things that like I didn't have a problem with, but over time it's just started to irk me a little bit. And this is how a lot of things happen with me. Like, I don't necessarily throw things out the window, and it's not like I think I'm holier than thou and I throw something out the window. It's usually like over time, as I go through healing, as I, you know, discover more about the world, the way I think about things just changes. And I honestly think that's a result of a real relationship with God. Anyway, so I started to think about this daddy thing. And like, don't get me wrong, if a woman's calling a guy daddy and like he's the father of your children and you call him daddy, and like, and then that crosses over because now you like, yeah, she calls me daddy because I'm your dad, like kind of thing, that's normal. I'm talking about when that's not the case and there are most definitely daddy issues involved, right? That's not necessarily, we're not down the fetish route right now, but you guys get what I'm talking about. That for me is screaming daddy issues. And it's screaming daddy issues on both sides, because it's like the girl wanting to potentially, let's say that these are both fatherless individuals, right? It's like the female, I'm really getting into some stuff that I've thought about and I've probably never said out loud before, but I've thought a lot about. I think a lot, guys, I'm sure you can tell. Anyway, you got the fatherless female and the fatherless male coming together, engaging in sexual intercourse, right? I'm suggesting that some of people's sexual into whatever's fetishes and stuff is they're masking things as fetishes or whatever's because of the childhood trauma. You got the woman who wants to be dominated, right? A lot of women, let's be honest, let's be very honest, ladies. A lot of women want to be dominated. They want an aggressive man, this, that, and the other, which is why I talked about in a very old video why a lot of women prefer the bad guys to the good guys, because bad guys tend to exude more of the qualities that women are looking for, especially if they haven't had a strong male figure of like masculinity, provision, protection, all that stuff. They tend to exude that energy more quickly and more clearly. Even if it's for the form of them seeing them fighting, then they feel like, oh, that man can defend them, right? So in that same dynamic, you got the women who then want to call this person this because they want to be the dominated one, right? And then you have the man who didn't have a father, who now is trying to be a man without any male wisdom, which, by the way, shout out to any man out there. God bless every single one of you. If you're watching this video, receive this blessing in the name of Jesus, because I feel for you guys. I think it's a very hard job to try and be a man without the counseling of another man before you. It's an extremely hard. Just to let you know, the Lord is your father. He can father you even if nobody else can. So can or has. I just want to put that out there. I think that is one of the most difficult things to do. Point blank period. Okay. So I feel for you guys. But then you also have that where the guys are like ego driven. They want to feel dominated. They want to feel like they're the protector, the dominator, the whatever. And so we come together and we have this daddy thing now. And that's where I think a lot of these fetishes, they really come from. People have these things, and it's like a justification. It's like a you know, like how I said energy is not created or destroyed, but it can only be transferred. So that energy that was inside of you from, you know, being abandoned or rejected or whatever from your father, let's say, now you are exchanging that energy between one another. You, from your daddy issues as a woman, lacking, you know, that male over you, that protection that you've always yearned and looked for and whatever. You, the man, having lacked real fatherhood, wanting to be a man, feeling the pressure in the world of being able to be a man, which is a huge pressure for men, which I'm grateful that's not a burden I have to bear, and it is a burden. So I pray for all you men out there, and I do pray for the men all the time. Anyway, or I have prayed for the men. Anyway, so that's how a lot of these fetishes come about. It's your opportunity to exchange that energy, right? In a way that you can, like, it's almost like euphoric, but in a long-term damaging type of way. Does that make sense? It's not healthy. Because at the end of the day, the issues that came are still there. You as the woman, you still have those issues. So once that interaction is over, you guys might have been, you know, knocking them ankles loose to the whatever, and he might have given you the best time ever. But at the end of the day, when it comes to other things, you ain't feeling happy. You ain't feeling satisfied. On the reverse, it's the same thing. As a man, you might still feel this, that, and the other. And so these things, a lot of the time, in my opinion, it's kind of like this, what Murad was saying. He said previously that what he went through, it actually made him, he didn't realize how him engaging in these acts that he did willingly as an adult would affect him in the future. That's my point. He thought that this was just an innocent whatever, or a dark kink. And this is why I say, yes, it is aiding and abetting institutional forms of racism. And it also is a dark kink. It's both. Because people doing that a lot of the time, I find the most racist people, in my opinion, are usually the fetishizer ones. Fetishizers, if that's a word. I feel more of a racist tone when I talk about, like, the experiences I told you guys about being fetishized as being a black woman. I feel more racist elements in an interaction with that person than in somebody asking me genuine questions or having genuine concerns about me as a black person based on a negative experience they've had from black people. Does that make sense? Because I've been through those situations before, you know, where somebody has had something and I can fully sympathize with why they feel a certain way. So, for example, I remember I had a friend who, her dad didn't want her to date any black guys, right? And she was white, I'm black, right? And I love how I said I'm black. I don't know why I had to say that. Anyway, so but the reason for that was because his wife, which is his second wife, she had been I think cheated on and physically abused by a black man, and they had a child together who I think experienced some of that as well. So he was very protective of the wife. So his skepticism, to me, I understand that. I'm like, fair enough, you know what, I'm disappointed that one of us black folk did something negative, and I get really annoyed when black people do stuff that makes black people look bad. I'm like, bruh, as if we don't have enough of it. Like, why can't we just pattern up, you know? But then on the other hand, you have these people who are probably coming up to me like, oh wow, did you do your hair yourself? Yeah, I've been to Africa. Yeah, you know, I actually really like, yeah, African place down the road. Yeah, I take my African niece there all the time. Yeah, like, which of those interactions do you think? Do you see what I'm saying? So I think that, yes, on both ends, yes, it is a dark kink, and it's dark as in it's a problem. And yes, it is an institutional form of racism, because it allows for racism to continue in the world to the point that, like, because I was thinking, right, and I've decided, and you guys tell me in the comment section, do you think I should just start clapping back at some of these people? Because I like, this guy, I wanted to be like, I was just, because I'm one of those people, and this is what kind of annoys me. Sometimes, it depends on my mood. Sometimes I'm in the type of mood where I can come with quick comebacks like this, right? It was what somebody's saying. Sometimes I need time to process stuff, right? And I'm a processor. That's why a lot of times stuff goes viral, whatever, online, and people will talking about it, and you'll hear me talk about it like a week later, and it's because I need to think about it, and also because I don't want to be an ignoramus and just say stuff without thinking about it. But anyway, so sometimes I just think to myself, like, I want to ask these people, like, do you want a gold medal, like, for, like, supporting the black folk? Like, do you want to the Black Alliance Award? Like, I don't know what to say to these people, you know, because these people actually irritate me, by the way. This is what actually irritates me. And I might just start throwing hands at this point. Anyways, guys, okay. I feel like we've touched on this enough for this video. We're going to do one more video because, just to round this all up, and I guess that will make this to 5 parts, my goodness. But the reason why I made this into such a long thing, and the reason why I think it's helpful and it's necessary, is because so many of the little things he said, so many of the statements he was making, I was thinking, I can make a whole video about that, I can make a whole video about that, I can make a whole video about that. And not just that I could make a video, but that it's important to speak on, in my opinion, because these are things that affect everyone. Again, the rule, not the exception. So many people have been through stuff. I would argue that everybody has been through some form of trauma, right, at one point or another. And the modern day society that we live in, especially those of us in the Western world, actually, around the whole world, we all have our own different problems. Let's just put it like that, right? We are not a world that is well built to deal with this stuff, and it's done like that on purpose, because then all we do is we internalize that stuff, and it all makes us, you know, it makes us victims to, the evil people in this world, because then we're all so dealing with all of our mental health issues, and we're dealing in poverty, we're all dealing in all these different things, right? In stress, in toxic relationships, all these things that take over our mind, take over our lives and live in our heads rent free. We become susceptible to just being used and abused by the powers that be. And then we wonder how this stuff is happening. And it's because we were so busy dealing with all the emotional turmoil, the triggers, the mental health, the this, that, and the other of things that we're going through, the lack of support, the lack of opportunity to speak, the lack of people around us, this, that, and the other. And we need to talk about it, okay? So that's why we're talking about this, guys. Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're feeling the vibe and you want to join the tribe. Don't forget to come and talk to me in part 5, where we're going to round this up with the last few things that he was talking about. And he talked more about how his experience motivates him to speak on different things, blah, blah, blah. He also talks about how he feels he let everybody down, and I honestly don't feel like he did in his last, and I'm going to explain why I don't think he did in my next video. So I'll see you guys in part 5. Hope you guys are enjoying this. God bless every single one of you. It is not nighttime, it's actually early in the day. It's just that the sky, the sun is, I don't know where, but anyways, guys, we're making it work. God bless you all, and I'll see you in my next one. Goodbye.